From IBM TV, International Broadcast Media, this is The Lawyer's Den, a special report from American politics. This unique broadcast brings you in-depth discussions with American legal scholars to discuss the current issues. I'm Bill Tresemont, and along with my esteemed colleague from the South, Nick Palavita, we're your co-hosts. Nick, will you please do the honor of introducing the guests?
Yes, I will. And for hailing from the Salt Lake City area, licensed before the Supreme Court of the United States, been practicing law for many years, actually got me into the Supreme Court of the United States. A JDLLM attorney is Jeff Treichert. I say Tresemont. You guys have tea to begin. Jeff Treichert, welcome to the show. Of course, I know who Jeff is. All right. Now the thing is, we have on the other corner, hailing from the South, but not really, because he actually is from the Northeast, went to NYU, went to Ohio State, went to the University of Southern California, teaches at in Georgia law. We have Adam Lamparero. Adam, welcome again to the show.
Great to be here.
And just to clarify, because I had some comments about who the mouth of the South was, I wasn't referring to you. I was referring to me. I'm from the South. You're not. So no one could wear that moniker unless you're really from the South. You're from the Northeast, so you don't get to be the mouth of the South. That's my job. But anyway, the thing is, it looks like you have some very exciting topics, Bill, to cover today on the Lawyer's Den. Better than Judge Judy. Yes. Oh, by the way, right now during this hour, you could watch Judge Judy, another small claims court. Somebody didn't pay their rent and they're suing each other. Or you can go to the Lawyer's Den and see what do we have today on the Lawyer's Den, Bill.
Well, first, just an update for our audience. Soon-to-be Justice Barrett has taken one step closer, and I believe that the Senate is going to confirm her this evening. And then the reports are that she is to head over to the White House, where she will be given the official oath by Justice Clarence Thomas. And that should be happening sometime during this hour. And once she is given the constitutional oath, she will be ready to start hearing cases tomorrow. And
really?
Now wait, and as a teaser for, later down the road, and I know, young man, that this is just complete boring, but we are going to have to face the music at some point. All of these voting rights cases are coming up, and they are bubbling up into the Supreme Court. And currently right now, the Supreme Court has on their shadow docket, quote unquote shadow docket, which for our audience means it's the stuff that they don't want anybody to kind of know about, but they're issuing decisions. All of these emergency appeals are coming up from the states regarding various voting rights issues and ballot access, et cetera. And they have been issuing a number of these decisions unsigned, already shaping the stuff. But at some point in time, those voting rights issues are going to come up. However, not tonight, because you know why? You know what we have tonight?
What?
Everything that everybody across the world loves. Free speech. Who gets to monitor it? Who gets to police it? Who can tell us when we have to shut up? And when, where, and under what circumstances does the law allow us to speak freely? So,
hey, you froze up, and if you were at Economics Monday this morning, you would have listened to the new law that was passed in Hong Kong. Rakesh, who lives there, our Hong Kong correspondent, said they have a new law, and basically you can forget saying anything bad about the Chinese government. So unless you want to go.
Well, no, I mean, and actually just to, because it does tie in what you're talking about. Essentially, to our audience, China in charge of Hong Kong's whatever governmental authority there, it's kind of unclear, passed what we would call a series of sedition laws.
Yes, right. Sedition laws.
Making essentially illegal to speak ill will of just about anything that China does not like. And not surprisingly, the protests that have been going on for an entire year have suddenly disappeared.
Yeah, but you have to look at it this way. You see, we're about the power of positive thinking here on IBM TV. Just think about it. If you do something in Hong Kong and you get caught for sedition, you get a free vacation to Outer Mongolia. Okay, Ulaanbaatar, here we come. Right.
All right. Well, listen, everybody, because this is where it comes into play. This is a prime example where Nick's preference for dictatorship destroys the very foundations that I am upholding over here with the 99% saying democracy works. And Jeff, you're already rubbing your eyes because I know today you're just going to have to take your old friend out because he is dead wrong.
Wait, that's total your opinion. As you see, China is a fast-growing economy, 8% GDP. Look, the people are better off than starving. And what all they had to do is get rid of your phony notion of freedom of speech. Get rid of that, and the country prospers. But go ahead and support the phony notion.
Speech, protest, anything, like, unless you're saying, thank you, sir, may I have another? I think that's about the extent of it. Now, at that point, listen, what would you like to do, Nick? Do you want to turn it over to the other gentleman, or
we're gonna turn it over to the other varmint in a minute? But basically, the thing is, your oppositional defiance disorder is just startling, amazing, and the real problem for you Americans, you have too much ODD, oppositional defiance disorder. You're given a task to do. Just don't say something bad about the government. Chinese people fall in line. We don't. If they don't, they go to Outer Mongolia. Instead, all we do is complain all the time. Build America. Don't complain, but go on.
Well, given that tall order.
Yes.
Okay, which one? Jeff or Adam? Who wants to take the first stab at what's been going on with the Supreme Court and our hate speech? Because I hate to say it, but the world is a Twitter with
well, explain to the world what the facts are, Bill. What are the facts with Twitter? Explain to them what they are.
Well, Adam, can you give us the facts, please?
Yeah,
of the case?
Yeah.
Well, the case involving President Trump involves his Twitter account. President Trump, as you know, is very expressive on his Twitter account, and there are often many people who comment on his or reply to his tweets in a very critical way. So what President Trump did was to block a user for making a very critical comment saying you didn't win the election, Russia won it for you. And after Trump blocked him, the issue was for the courts was, did Trump blocking him violate the First Amendment, right to freedom of speech? And so far, the answer has been yes to that question. And I, quite frankly, disagree with it and have a very different view on the First Amendment than most. But I'll save that for later.
Okay, I'm going to unmute my co-host. But I agree with Adam on this. Okay,
well, Nick, we have to hear what Jeff has to say first.
Okay, right. Before we outnumber him, go on. Yeah, Jeff, what do you think?
Well, I agree with Adam too. I think that the idea that the president's private Twitter account suddenly has become state action. For those who don't know, the Bill of Rights does not limit the power of private companies or private individuals. It limits the power of government. And so, for example, if I sign a non-disclosure agreement pursuant to employment with an employer, I can't go later and sue the employer and say, you took away my free speech rights by not allowing me to disclose private company information. It requires state action. And so the government has to be the one doing it. And people are saying, well, Trump is the government. And so by him blocking someone on Twitter, he is taking action as the president to squelch that person's free speech. And I think, that person is free to set up a Twitter account of his or her own and say, I think that Russia got the election for Trump. It doesn't mean that Trump in his private Twitter account or using the bully pulpit anywhere has to make room for people to disagree with him. It would be chaos even if out on the White House lawn, we said the president has to let anybody who wants to come and take over a press conference and say whatever they choose. He can't punish them for doing it. He's free to block them from his Twitter account.
Yeah. Okay. What do you say, Bill?
Okay.
On this issue?
Well, two things. First, and Jeff, I'm really, because that's exactly where we were going to drive this discussion this evening, and that is whether or not private companies should be held to the standard of freedom of speech. However, I want to begin with simply this. It was Justice Kennedy that said that we will not know, and he said this some years ago, we will not know how the social media and the internet will change the nature of our debate and discussions. And in fact, it has become true, whether it's on be it video or internet groups or Twitter or what have you. It has become a public square, and therefore the rights of free speech ought to attach. Now, specifically with regard to President Trump, to the extent that Trump uses his quote unquote private Twitter account to announce major policy decisions, accept resignations, and otherwise perform governmental business, that therefore makes it a governmental, in effect, a governmental account in purpose, in action, in design, and in keeping. And at that point, when the government or Trump attempts to, he loses that private status. And at that point, any limitations on the public's right to comment on anything that he puts up there is a violation of the law. And
okay, you express the incorrect viewpoint very carefully, Bill, but now we want to know what you actually think, because we know that that is the minority, extreme, horrible viewpoints of other parties. What do you think?
I think everybody should be allowed to squat on President Trump's Twitter account.
Oh, is this for real? You know, I like to block who I like to block. I mean, you know, it's just the mute mic works for a reason, as they would say. So anyway, you know, so anyway, the thing is, so you would actually be in the minority here, 3-1, or actually you don't even have to vote because you'd be outvoted on the lawyer's den. Because the thing is, look, you know, when some obnoxious troll gets on my account, I don't care if it's public or private, I like to block them, period. Okay, and I should have the power to block them. I don't want some obnoxious troll in there. But, you know, we're a free country. We respect minority opinions, even though they're completely wrong. So go ahead. You can continue to express that totally incorrect opinion.
I mean, I will, but I want to give equal, airtime. Adam came in, you know, like a firebrand. He was ready for this fight. He said he was going to save it for later. I went through and enunciated, or at least my outline. Adam, it is your turn to disseminate and dissect.
Okay. Well, the first thing I'll say is the First Amendment is designed to give people the right to speak freely on political issues. It protects minority viewpoints. It protects dissenting opinions. And that's great to create a marketplace of ideas. However, while I respect the right of everyone to freely express their political views, I don't respect speech and don't think speech should be protected if it has little value and if it causes emotional distress. And I think that the court's decision in Snyder versus Phelps was wrong. And I think Alito's dissent in Snyder versus Phelps was right. I don't have as much of a robust view of free speech as most do. I think that speech that is of no value, that is intentionally targeted to hurt somebody, and that causes emotional distress, such as in Snyder versus Phelps, when one of the protesters held up a sign that said, "God hates fags," outside of a church where the funeral of a soldier who had died in the Iraq War was being held, is unacceptable, has no relationship to the purpose of the First Amendment, has no social value, and is very injurious. So I take a more restrictive view of what speech should be allowed, and I think, quite frankly, that the obscenity doctrine should be expanded to include certain types of speech that, although not containing a sexual component, such as child pornography, nonetheless cause great societal harm and have no societal value.
Meaning he doesn't like internet trolls. And by the way, the originalist,
well said.
I don't know whether you saw internet trolls in the Constitution. I read them into the Constitution, but internet trolls, how could you predict these people would jump up and say something incredibly stupid? I get them on Facebook all the time. Yep. I love to block them. If a government official blocks them, that's great too. I hope they get blocked forever. Yeah.
Okay. No. I want to hear Jeff's concurring opinion.
Right. Yeah, you'll hear Jeff's concurring opinion.
Is your concurring opinion on the same grounds as Adam's?
I differ with Adam a little bit on this. Adam may be able to remind me the name of the Supreme Court case where the KKK was marching at Skokie, and the question was whether that could be that speech could be suppressed based on the viewpoint that was, to say the least, far out of the mainstream of society. And the holding of the case is that no, the KKK can speak freely too. Mm-hmm. And the solution to speech that we don't like is more speech.
Mhm.
It's that we do like. And I believe the president has a bully pulpit. If we take this business too far of the idea that, someone is a public official and therefore his or her Twitter account is an official government mouthpiece, I think we're looking at, I mean, geez, all four of us are officers of the court, right? Anything we say on our Facebook pages potentially could be suppressed because we're not allowing every dissenting view, and we might block someone on Facebook for expressing ideas that we consider offensive. So I mean, I don't believe in viewpoint-based restrictions on speech. I think we've got to tolerate an awful lot of speech that we don't like, including from the KKK, which I don't like. But I think we have to tolerate it because we're in a society where we believe that free and open discussion is worth the price we pay for it.
Okay, that raises this very, very interesting thing. Now, I know for all of my, LLMs, so that's Larry, Louie, and Michael. The three of you all agree that the courts have it wrong, except that I might be in the minority here, but the law is on my side. However, I'm intrigued for the following two reasons, because Adam's basis for meaningless, no value, with an intent to hurt, and an obscenity expansion, with the exception of child pornography. That indicates that maybe there's a value judgment that we would have a board of censors. Now, normally that would be speculative with the government issue, but I want to turn our attention, because I want to take exactly Adam's point. We're going to leave the government because that's settled law. And I want to go to what Jeff talked about, that said that the Constitution just protects us from state action. How about the area of private companies? Jeff, you mentioned the idea of signing an NDA or whatever private agreement. What do you make of Twitter and, all of these other social platforms, Facebook, censoring tweets and accounts based on Adam's viewpoint of speech that is meaningless, speech that has no value, speech that is intended to hurt and or expanding? Because that's in fact what they've done in the private sector. They've taken Adam's standards and they've applied it to, particularly now during the presidential election. So, Jeff, what do you think of that? How do you square that up? Because you said before that private companies get to do whatever they want as long as the people assent. But these companies are doing it with or without their assent.
Well, I think that's a very interesting question, and it's one that I don't think the jurisprudence is really clear on at this point. But this is my opinion. I think, yes, those companies can do what they want in terms of censoring what people say, but I think they need to take the consequences of that. This is what I mean. For example, they could take the position that, look, we're not responsible for what people on our network, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is. We're not responsible for what people on there say. We're just providing a forum, but those people are responsible individually if they set up an account for what they're saying. They could also take the position, no, this is our TV station and we're deciding what goes on our TV station. Well, it seems like they're trying to have it both ways right now. My query is, all right, let's suppose somebody goes on YouTube and tells somebody how to create a nuclear bomb in their basement. Is YouTube responsible for that content and the damage that may come from it? If somebody goes on Facebook and slanders someone, is Facebook jointly and severally liable for that, because they are reserving the right to censor content and they didn't censor that? So I think they have to make a decision. Are we a platform that allows anybody to say anything they want, or are we a TV station basically, and we take full responsibility for all the programming? I think they have to make up their minds what they are and what responsibility they're going to take for the content, because otherwise I think well, we're meddling here and there where we feel like it, but we aren't responsible for anything that gets past us. I don't think they can do that.
Okay, excellent. And Jeff, you hang on, and Nick, you hang on, because Nick, you're going to come in and you're going to save the day. Adam, your meddlesome, intrusive, arbitrary standard of deciding what's meaningless. That entire standard is being tested in the private sector right now, much to your happiness. Jeff hates it. He believes that it's a wishy-washy, value-based. I mean, it's the worst, like the most activist liberal, sticking their nose in our business, deciding what is or what is not, what can, what's valuable, what's not valuable, and yet you would propose such a circumstance. What gives, Adam? Because your buddy hates it.
Yes, I think it was Justice Powell in Miller versus California who said regarding obscenity, I know it when I see it. And if you look at Cohen versus California, the case in which an individual walked into a courthouse wearing a shirt that said F the draft, clearly that was political speech. But when you look at these other cases, like Snyder versus Phelps, where protesters go outside of a funeral, where the family is mourning the loss of their son, and hold up a sign that says, God hates fags. Or when you go outside of an abortion clinic and you see people holding signs of dead fetuses, gruesome pictures, to me, there is no social value to that. In addition, especially in the case of Snyder versus Phelps, that speech is really injurious to us and targeted at a specific person. And quite frankly, I think it should not be protected under the First Amendment. I also think Hustler versus Falwell was wrongly decided in that. Yes, I do. I think it was atrocious for Hustler magazine to be publishing images of Jerry Falwell having sexual relations with his mother in an outhouse. I don't care if it was satirical. It was meaningless. It had no value. And I don't think the First Amendment should extend to protect that speech.
Okay, Nick.
Oh, Adam. Okay, Adam and I agree. Obviously, since bright LLMs all agree on this whole thing relating to speech, and the JD, well, we won't go there. The thing is, even if you look at it, there's a lot of speech that just has no bloody value. And so the thing is, we have mute buttons today. We have internet trolls today. We need to eliminate that. And like I said, even in Hong Kong, they just got sick and tired of it. So they passed a sedition law. I don't like sedition laws. I don't like to be told what to do. But you know what? They're all falling in line. Thank you. And get back to work and do what you need to do to improve your lives and not sit there and, bellyache all over Hong Kong. So the thing is, what we see here is the same thing. I agree. This worthless, hey, I'm gonna spew vermin and vitriol all over the place because I have the right to freedom of speech. It's got to end somewhere. It ends with the LLMs here on the lawyer's desk.
No, listen, because you guys, I mean, for all of your lofty goals, aspirations, and fine language, it's us down in the heap of the law, crafty little trial litigators. Because Nick, I set you up. Weren't you the one on this very panel on a previous show talking about the abuse of these corporations and censoring various individuals or groups or organizations like IBM TV? Now, weren't you the one claiming and defending your right to engage in free speech without the interference by some private company running under Adam's notions of censorship? And you said at that time that you were against everything that you just said now, Nick, that you support.
Absolutely. I complain about it, Bill, but I recognize the fact is, whether we like it or not, YouTube can shut us down, which they demonstrated just the other day, because they are a private company, right, Bill? And you saw them shut down IBM TV.
No. But see, and herein lies the rub. They're a private company operating under the very expansive views of Professor Lamparello. Now, had we had more, conservative, may I say, originalist ideas of what we may or may not do, and I can't believe I'm saying that, but had we had a more conservative, smaller, targeted view of what was actually able to do, then YouTube wouldn't be able to do it if they applied those standards.
Okay. But let's let the audience know what YouTube did, because they don't know our history with YouTube. Okay, so we'll brief the audience. It's real simple. YouTube has invoked a 3 strikes you're out rule. Okay, they just made it up. They said if they find copyright material in something you did or something you did in the past, and they see it 3 times, they pull your whole network off of YouTube. Seriously. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, our friend in China and a couple of our people that produce our shows have copyrighted material that are on there. We had at one time 45 complaints by YouTube police to shut us down. But guess what? All of them we had permissions from to use. We had to go back and show YouTube, hey, look, it's copyrighted material, but not only fair use, it was our guest showing material that they did. But the YouTube people, they don't think that way. So yes, it upsets me that they can do that, Bill. But do they have the legal right to do it? Absolutely. They're a private company. They can go like this to us. And all we do is leave YouTube and go to LinkedIn and Facebook. And the real problem is that the real problem that I have isn't so much that YouTube can do it. The real problem I have is YouTube that's owned by Google is also in cahoots with Apple, that's in cahoots with Facebook. And what happens is collectively they can destroy people, which is one reason the Justice Department slammed them with the antitrust suit, which was the right thing to do. Because there's no other place to go because they're monopolies.
No, you're absolutely right. Because, and what you should also know, what our audience should know, is that Facebook was just slapped with a series of lawsuits by the Federal Trade Commission and a number of states' attorney general, following up in the same kind of.
I didn't see that. When did that happen?
That happened last week, Nick. Well,
really? I was asleep. Okay.
No. I'm sure you were out there with the 1%ers at your country club, enjoying.
True. You got a good point.
Or whatever it is that you enjoy at the country clubs, while the rest of us are hustling. But listen, I want to get back to just this one other point. I hear you, Nick, and you made a valiant attempt at pitching both sides. But that's not really going to work, Nick, because that is the example of a slippery, slimy lawyer that gives us all a bad name. I'm going to go back to the professor, and then Jeff, I'm coming to you. Now, Professor, seriously, you see in action what your expansive proposal would do in the acting out in the private sector. Okay. Now, is that what you would really want our government to be able to do to us? Because who's to say who to censor or the person judging whether or not the speech is meaningless?
My answer to that is yes. And what I would do is have a clear and workable standard that identifies what I would call obscene speech. And I would take the test from Miller versus California and say speech that has no literary, scientific, or artistic value, and that directly targets another individual and causes emotional distress is not protected under the First Amendment.
Listen, standard, song that you're singing.
I can't hear you.
I said under that standard, somebody could object to a song that you were singing.
Hey, listen, under that standard, we'd have to shut Facebook down. But go on.
They wouldn't be able to object to it because part of the test would be that the speech has to have no societal value. We do it under obscenity law. The only difference with obscenity law is that there has to be a sexual component to what we consider obscene. What I'm saying is that you can have speech that is obscene, but that doesn't have a sexual component to it. The sexual component is not necessary. When you hear things like "God hates fags" or or "Thank God for 9/11," that speech is trash. It is injurious and it has no place in society and contributes nothing to public debate. End of story.
No, you're right. As grotesque as it may be, it has a place in our society because we value free speech. And the argument goes that should we begin to censor that, the most grotesque and outrageous?
Yeah, I mean, where do you get this?
I don't value trash or the people who disseminate it.
Yeah. Thank you, Adam. Okay, the thing is, what you guys got to learn is that free speech has limits. In other words, free speech isn't trash speech. Now, of course, if you applied Adam's standard, they'd shut all of Facebook down because most of it has no social literary or any form of value whatsoever. Okay, but the thing is, at a certain level, right, Adam? I mean, you've been on Facebook. There's nothing that has any value there.
There are some problems.
Okay, right. Yeah, there's some problems with that standard. But the thing is, what's wrong with higher standards, Bill? Why do you want to wallow in the mud? Wait, sorry, you live in Washington, D.C. You're used to the mud. Sorry about that. But there's some people that live in respectable communities like Salt Lake, Raleigh, Durham, Georgia, not Washington, D.C., that they really don't enjoy the mud pool and the mud hole that you're trying to create throughout the whole United States of America.
No, I'd like a second opinion. Jeff, can you help me out? Because,
I don't think you're going to get any help there, but go ahead, Jeff.
I'm going to ask for help. It's a lifeline, Nick. Jeff?
Well, look, let me preface what I'm saying by the fact that I don't believe God hates fags, quoting the quote he gave us. The way I read the Bible, 1 John chapter 4 says that God is love. Given that is my opinion. Someone else may believe that's really how God feels and that's their religious view. I don't require that people agree with me in order to have the right to say what they think, even if what they think is patently offensive to me, which that message is. But I still fight for their right to say it. Mm-hmm. And I believe the solution is not suppressing speech, it is more speech. It's getting up and saying, quoting 1 John chapter 4, saying, he who loveth not knoweth not God, for God is love. It is saying what I think in opposition to the message rather than suppressing the message. And I believe that's a big part of what our republic is founded on. And I think we have to, in a free society, we have to tolerate a lot of messages that we don't agree with, and even messages that we find patently offensive. And I think, I hate to say the word slippery slope, but I think we're on a slippery slope when we start determining what is an acceptable or unacceptable message in what we're saying.
Okay, then let me flip the question around. Now that we've seen some of these principles working out in the private sector, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, do we think that we can apply that to the federal government through the next series of cases? And do we think the Supreme Court is in fact going to do that now that they have a solid 5-3 majority?
They're going to do what, Bill?
The cases that are coming up with regard to free speech, challenging, there are a number of cases that are coming up saying essentially that Twitter has censored them or Facebook has removed their accounts and various other things, not unlike based on the Trump case that Adam talked about earlier.
Well, Bill, they're private companies. This is what I go back to. YouTube, whether you like it or not, is a private company. Same with Facebook.
No, I understand that, Nick.
No.
If he was an LLM, certainly should know that there is a public doctrine. I mean, Professor Adam, do you want to help him out on this one? Because it's pretty straightforward. It's that essentially it says that where a private company operates substantially in the public and hands over enough rights and things so that at some point in time, ideas like the First Amendment attach even to private enterprises.
Well, that's correct, and I suspect the Supreme Court will take a very robust view of free speech, as it has done in Citizens United and McCutcheon. And I suspect I will completely disagree with it. I mean, for example, I don't think there's any place in society for racist, homophobic, sexist comments, and I think that trash has no place in society, and I think it's completely indecent. And I don't think it's part of respecting free speech. I think it's part of respecting decency and trying to create a more decent society.
So, Adam, do you agree with the doctrine that allows the extension of First Amendment principles onto private property and ownership?
Not necessarily. I would only agree to the extent that the private company is de facto operating as a government entity or is sufficiently connected to a government entity. I think private corporations pretty much have the right to do what they want. So that's a real tough issue. And I think that I wouldn't necessarily extend First Amendment protections to purely private corporations.
Jeff, what do you think? First Amendment to private corporations?
Well, like I said before, in my view, the analysis goes like this. If all you're doing is providing a forum for people to individually have their say, then First Amendment rights attach. If you are doing that but saying this is my TV station and I have the right to control all the content on it, then First Amendment rights don't attach but you're responsible for whatever's coming out over that channel that you don't stop from coming over that channel. I think the internet is public space. I don't necessarily think Facebook is public space, but if they choose to not be public space, I think that they are potentially liable for the messages that come across their network.
Okay, Nick, do you think that YouTube is operating as a television station or as a public space?
Yeah, that's saying either or, JD. Okay, just depends. All right. The thing is, as Deion Sanders says, do you play baseball or do you want to contract with football? He goes, both. Okay, so YouTube right now, the monopolistic world of its own, because here's the problem. Okay, let's imagine we couldn't post on YouTube and you want to be in a video sharing. Where do you go? The number 2 competitor is what? Vimeo, right? And then the number 3 competitor is who? Who? Oh, nobody. It was Instagram, but didn't they buy Instagram? Yeah. What about these other TikTok? Well, that's owned by the Chinese. I mean, the real problem is, Bill, is we do not have a competitive environment in that space. We have an anti-competitive environment, and we have monopolistic companies that gobble up companies that tend to compete. So with that in mind, I believe, yes, they have the right to do it, but I also believe they need to be slapped hard with an antitrust suit. Oh, wait a minute, they just got sued. Sorry, Apple, Google are both being hit with antitrust suits because that's what they're doing. And it would not be bad if I can say, okay, YouTube, I'll just go to YouTube Plus, or I'll go to John Jones' place for social media. But that's not what happens. Facebook and YouTube maintain monopolistic positions in the social media marketplace. Period. The end. The Department of Justice is correct. And that's one reason why if you slap them around with freedom of speech issues, sure. You know, could they be not subject to it? Yes, but then they can't operate like a monopoly, which they do.
Okay, and here's a twist for Adam. I am throwing you a curveball. Ready?
Yes, absolutely. Oh, I hope so.
Okay. I hope so too, buddy, because you know, you're not in Kansas anymore. You may be in Georgia, but you know, the issue is simply this: that the public domain doctrine that you have just defended doesn't exist in the Constitution. It was made up in a penumbra. And I thought you hated those penumbra rights. So how could you be defending it right now, Adam?
Because I do not believe that it exists anywhere near the penumbras. I think rather it is a reasonable interpretation from the text and the original purpose of the First Amendment. And regarding public forums, I would kind of analogize it to this. When you're walking in a public park, you're in a public space, but there's a Walmart next to you. When you go inside the Walmart, you don't have a right to say and do anything you please. There are restrictions on what you can say. So it's not the same. Facebook is an organization giving a forum for speakers, but it doesn't mean they can say whatever they want.
Okay, no. Let me take the Walmart example and simply say this. What if Walmart was selling free speech? That is to say, Walmart was, hey, come on in and say whatever you want. So they're inviting you in to speak freely, thereby creating a very a public forum, and that's their issue. Does that change your analysis?
Yes, it changes it. If they specifically say, come in and say whatever you want, then they have to abide by that policy. It comes down to the policy that the organization adopts.
Right. And isn't
speech.
that what Facebook has done? And isn't that what YouTube has done?
Correct.
Great. So then in effect, they are a public domain, right?
They're a limited public domain or a quasi-public domain. They're not the same. They're like the Walmart on Main Street. They're not the public park.
Adam, you are good. You're really good. But there is no such thing as a quasi or a limited public domain, at least not in the Constitution or in anything that I've read. So where are you pulling those rights from, Adam?
I'm pulling them from the government's ability to reasonably regulate speech, because speech is not an absolute right. And
you're making it up.
I'm not making it up whatsoever. The public forum doctrine and the Supreme Court has established public forums, limited public forums, and private forums. Walmart is a limited public forum where you have the right to speech, but you don't have the right to do anything, say anything you want, because the owners of that store have a right to set the policies on the property and in the business they've established. And I think that's what Facebook is doing.
No, no, no. That's not what Facebook is doing. Facebook and YouTube said, "Come one, come all. Give me your poor, your huddled masses."
Oh, okay, fair enough.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah.
So at that point, Facebook and YouTube are different. And so therefore public domain attaches perhaps to the highest level, which means that they would almost be acting like a state institution. And therefore they would have to abide by our principles of the First Amendment. Yes or no?
They would be, but if they had a clear policy regarding and regulating speech that was not vague and that was clearly communicated to the public, they could do that just like Walmart could do that.
Okay. Okay. Well, I guess I'm not going to convince you about Walmart. Nick, Jeff, you guys want to take a turn at this?
Oh, I just want to make a comment on this to Professor Adam. You know that Bill spends all week looking at questions to dig you with. I mean, the thing is, so it's not like it's personal. He just spends his whole week, his whole life, sometimes 24 hours looking at how can he frame questions to get to
It's
Adam.
fun.
I mean, it's like a little job here. But the thing is, once again, I do concur with Adam, Bill. Your mud pool in Washington, D.C. that is trying to say, hey, freedom of speech is for everybody, no matter how disgusting, dishonorable, how worthless it is, and that can be plastered all in front of everybody's face, is something that's not acceptable to the Southern gentlemen that exist in the United States, and frankly, our friends out west. Now, the people in the Northeast, they're used to it. I mean, because you guys are used to waddling the mud. But that's the reason is all innovation has taken place outside the Northeast. It's not in the Northeast, okay? Because you guys are spending too much time yelling and screaming at each other, flipping birds, and spending time in the mud pool. We're not. We're here to do something progressive. And what happens is people like Adam and myself, we really don't appreciate the mud pool that you call freedom of speech.
Okay.
But go on.
No. First, because I want to give everybody their due. Jeff, do you have any thoughts? And then I do have a response, Nick. But Jeff, let's go to you first, please.
Well, I think Adam is right in the sense that no right that we have under the Constitution is unlimited. My freedom of religion does not allow me to turn your living room into my holy shrine and move in there and begin worshiping. There's all kinds of limitations on our rights, but when it comes to free speech, we have a couple of very important standards, and one that is that we protect political messages with the highest form of care and protection, and another is we don't like content-based restrictions. And the messages that he's talking about are highly offensive to me, but they're both political and content-based, even though they might hurt somebody's feelings. And I think we have to put up with an awful lot of speech that hurts our feelings to maintain a free society. So Nick may remember that I ran against a judge once and I criticized her for holding that, I'll use the words self-touching by nude dancers in public places was speech. And I criticized her for that, saying, I don't think that's really speech. I don't think there's really a message in that. But I lost that election. In any case, I do think there are limits as to what qualifies as speech. But what I think he's talking about is something that really is speech, even though it's offensive speech. And I think the First Amendment means we have to put up with speech that offends us.
Well, the thing is, look what they did in Paris. I mean, was it Charlie Hebdo or whatever his name was? Yeah, they were basically taunting the Muslim community. And what I saw was something that was actually very offensive even to me. And then some teacher decides, oh, I'm going to show it to my class. Of course, he got beheaded. But I mean, the thing is, come on, there's nothing sacred about what he did to the students, had no business doing. It was totally derogatory. And so for that respect, I actually agree with our Muslim brothers, in spite of the fact I'm not sure if beheading somebody is the right solution. But the thing is, freedom of speech has to end somewhere. When you're so derogatory, I would think it would fit Adam's definition. This is worthless. It's almost like taunting. You know, in college football, if you taunt somebody, you get penalized. Well, if you taunt somebody, you're going to get penalized. So freedom of speech does have its limitations, and the Chinese government correctly said, hey, okay, we got to put a stop to this. Okay. The real problem with humans is that you don't want to be told what to do.
No, Nick, you had me at taunting, and you made the analogy.
Oh, I should have added it. Taunting is illegal.
When you went to the Chinese sedition laws, you know what it is. You and Adam, seriously, just press the envelope. I mean, it must be that zealous advocacy in you that you take way too seriously.
You remember, the thing is, he's not from the South, but what happened? He's now starting to get the Southern gentlemanness.
Very nice down here.
Living in Midgeville, okay, and starting to understand the culture of being a gentleman rather than living in a cesspool like Washington D.C. Okay. Nothing wrong with that. We have to have a certain amount of people that live there, but come on, Bill. I mean, the whole objective is to be positive, to improve people's lives. How does taunting improve people's life? How do internet trolls? They don't. So if they get smacked around, too bad.
Okay, then this becomes the question, it seems to me, as we kind of tease this out. Currently, we have the concentration of these limited public forums, Adam, these Walmarts. Such arguments, please. But they are imposing and self-selecting, and Nick, you say they have a right to do, and Adam, you have a strong basis in saying, meaningless, and Nick, taunting. I mean, it's all in that. Personally, I find that the holding of the signs and everything else is vile, and I do not agree with it, but I also agree with Jeff that we have to put up with a lot in order to maintain and protect a free society. But the question becomes, what if it swings to the other side? Who's to say that right now we just think that it's reasonable in terms of what they are deciding to censor, say on these private company open forums? What's to say that they decide that they're going to go further and start doing all kinds of things? Where do we get to say no?
Well, I'm going to go to Jeff's argument. If you expand the speech, it would stop this. In other words, basically, you have more companies out there that you can go to, but the real problem is we have monopoly. You have a Facebook, that's it. And that's the problem. The real problem isn't the freedom of speech. The problem is when you have one forum, Facebook, or one forum, YouTube, then you got a problem.
I'm sorry. Jeff, what do you think?
I do agree with Nick on that monopoly power is part of what creates this big problem. I mean, I think it's a two-edged. The tech revolution has been a two-edged sword that way. More people have their own TV station, so to speak, than ever before in history. I mean, everybody can gather a few thousand followers and start to say things about politics or religion or whatever they want to talk about, and put their message out there. The question then comes in, is it their free speech, or is it the free speech of the sponsoring company that hosts that space? And that's something we're still working out. But I think Nick is right that if there were more outlets for speech, and people could pick and choose the outlet that they want to be involved in, then there would be less of a problem. There was at one time, I mean, this kind of began with MySpace, and Facebook more or less put them out of business. Question of whether that was fair competition or they did something predatory, and I don't know enough about it to really tell you. But I think if there were a plethora of other outlets, we wouldn't be having this conversation. People would just pick and choose the one they wanted.
Okay, not so. Because don't we have an example of that? When we have a plethora of other outlets for TV stations, what we've ended up with, we thought we would have competition, but instead what we've ended up with is silos for political communication. So we have a television station that just merely echoes one particular kind of political thought, and we have another one that echoes another one, and never the two shall speak. So wouldn't that be the outlook? We might think that more competition would mean, well, all of the new outlets would then be balanced, but isn't it likely, in fact, true, that having more outlets means that each one would become polarized, which is what we've seen in television? Adam?
Well, I think having more outlets really reduces the strength of the claim that there's any free speech infringement. I mean, this is not state action. These are not government-sponsored or government-run corporations. they have the right to set forth policies that regulate the extent to which speech may be disseminated. Now, the individuals who claim to be affected have so many other avenues that they can express themselves. They can have their own blog. They can go protest in the public square. But there's no basis to claim, in my view, that there's any free speech violation. And quite frankly, when it comes down to regulating speech, I'll give you a perfect example of in Texas versus Johnson. I completely agree with Justice Scalia's decision that the First Amendment protects flag burning. What I do not agree with is speech that has no value, that is injurious, and that is pure trash. And that, to me, does not mean, yes, we should tolerate offensive speech. Yes, we should tolerate speech we don't like, but we shouldn't tolerate speech that is garbage. And a lot of speech out there is precisely that, garbage.
Okay, Nick. Hang on. Nick, isn't it true that the reason our speech has been in a race to the gutter is because of the education system, and that in order to alleviate Adam's concerns, all we have to do is teach our kids bigger words to insult each other with? Wouldn't that just fix the problem?
The education system can help solve the problem. I would agree with that, but
I know that's a red herring, Nick.
Yeah. Well, it's not a red herring. It's actually true. The thing is, the problem is we do not teach our kids values, and we do not teach them how to basically interact properly with other people. Except they do try to teach people in the South that. And that's why Adam's experiencing this culture shock that people are actually gentlemen, ladies and gentlemen. But in the Northeast and certain parts of the Midwest, they don't teach those people anything. So what are we supposed to do? You need a big cultural change here, Bill. And hiding behind amendments can only get you this country so far.
Oh,
so,
Nick, I mean, look, uninitiated out there, that statement that Nick, I have to apologize for my colleague. This is one time his mouth from the South went way too far. We do not hide behind the amendments. The amendments protect us from the government. So,
okay. No, I understand. I'm with groups of people that worship things that were written 200 years ago by people that are all dead. Okay, but for yours truly, I like to see some more modern language placed into this code that was written 200 years ago by people that are all dead.
Are you suggesting that we follow the Chilean government and open a constitutional convention and rewrite our constitution, Nick?
Yeah, of course. I mean, do you ever update your house? Yeah, of course, people do. As a matter of fact, there's a guy named Jefferson. You've probably not heard of him, but he said that we need to do this every 3 or 4 years. We haven't done it in 200 years. Bill.
Okay, Jeff, do you want to help your friend, or do you want to, tell him he's wrong? Which way you want to go on this one, Jeff?
On having a constitutional convention every few years?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm completely against that. I think our Constitution has served us well. It has been the bulwark of our liberty for 200 years. I don't want to throw it out. If we need to make reforms, I'd rather see it amended on distinct specifics than to take the whole thing and start over again.
Okay, Adam, this is a bit of a switch for you. We talked about the antitrust case and what the Justice Department, part of one of the remedies that they're seeking what they call structural change, which we know means break them up in legalese. Now, obviously, we've been talking about this within the context of having more competition. And so that would bust up Google with YouTube and whatever other things. Do you think the justices will consider that impact, specifically the new justice? Because you had talked about how the new justice considers the impact, or tends to, or may take into account the impact of the judicial rulings that she may make. And so do you think that the new justice and or the new conservative court may take into account the impact of breaking these monopolies up so as to take care of some of the problems that Nick and I hate about YouTube?
I think they're going to, and I think they should. I think breaking up Google would be an absolute nightmare. And quite frankly, anything the government does, they typically do really badly. So I think that would be a real problem. And yeah, I think they're going to consider the practical consequences of their decisions, and they should, because their decisions affect real people. So I'm not sure which way they'll go, but definitely the practicalities will weigh just as much as their interpretation of the statute.
You, Nick. Adam, the FTC wants to bust up Facebook. You see the same problems as busting up Google? Is that in the same wheelhouse?
I don't think it's going to be nearly as bad as if you break up Google, but I don't see why. Again, I don't really see why we would go after Facebook. I don't really see the problem. I don't see the same anti-competitive intent that I guess you all do, and maybe I'm missing something.
Nick, Adam's missing something. You want to help him out?
Yeah, I'll help him out a little bit about. First of all, let's go to the Google case. Something was clearly made out by the Department of Justice. They have like 97% stronghold control over search engines relating to cell phones. But let's see how they got there. They get there because they competed for the cell phone business? No. What they did is they did a kickback. It's called an illegal kickback everywhere else, revenue share in Google's term. They kicked back 8 to 12 billion a year to Apple to make sure that their search engine is on here. So what happens to Bing, which is the distant third with like 7% share? They're stuck out in the cold because Microsoft already got hit with antitrust and didn't want to get hit with it again. So Google, real simple, they got to give up their search engine here, baby, and give up that playing footsies with Apple. That's breakup number one. Breakup number two, Google acquired YouTube. What are they doing in the media business when they already control the search engines? Okay, so now they control two parts of people's lives, and that's creating a lot of the problems that we're seeing relating to freedom of speech. So the bust up of Google is real simple. Get them out of this illegal kickback, which, by the way, in any other industry, can you imagine they would get slaughtered? In financial services and life insurance, you get slaughtered if you engaged in these illegal kickbacks. But the tech industry doesn't have any law that says you can't kick back money illegally to people you want to work with. So they went ahead and did it. So what they did was legal, but the thing is it created basically a very anti-competitive environment that exists today where they control 95% of the search engines here and also in Android because they did the same thing. So yeah, bust them up.
Would you bust up Facebook too, Nick?
Well, Facebook did the same thing, except in a different form. Remember Instagram? Of course, back then, the Department of Justice goes, oh, yeah, they won't create anti-competitive. Of course, it was an anti-competitive move. And yeah, they need to spin off Instagram. IBM does not own IBM TV.tv, but we had to change our name to IBM TV.tv because of IBM. So the thing is, what happens, in my opinion, that'd be just more of an anti-competitive behavior on the part of IBM. But are they looking to move into media? Absolutely, because what happens if Facebook, Google, and Microsoft and everybody, Microsoft owns MSNBC, can get away with it, why wouldn't IBM deal with it? So what happens is that we have in this country, as you guys all know, 90% of every media that you see is owned by 5 companies.
That's right.
Yep.
Go ahead, Nick.
Well, the thing is, now you talk about freedom of speech. What freedom of speech? You got 5 companies controlling everything that you see, hear, and do in this country. Now, the only place that's worse that we've seen internationally is Russia. They have one company that controls 90%. The other one is India. India has 500 companies controlling their media. 500 compared to our 5.
Well, you see, we're about at that hour, and I've got to give Jeff a chance. But I do have to admit this. Adam, if you would just apply the public domain doctrine to these private companies, I would endorse your standard of censorship because I think it's right. But you're not giving me an inch, and so I'm not giving you an argument or a win.
Okay.
Okay?
Fair
Now,
enough.
Jeff and Nick, you guys can divide the rest of the thing. And Nick, you should give Jeff, because Jeff has defended you multiple times and pulled you out of the ditch.
Yeah, usually in court, by the way, because I get myself in trouble. That's the reason I have the lawyers den. I'm gonna have to hire everybody to defend myself eventually. So, got to have a lot of lawyer friends on payroll, by the way. But go on.
So, Jeff,
well, I'm gonna try and say something from 30,000 feet about all this antitrust stuff that Nick has been talking about. He mentioned the insurance business, life insurance. the number of people that control that industry in the United States would fit in a relatively small room. In this country, 7% of the population controls 93% of the wealth. Now, I am not a socialist. I'm not a redistributionist, but that demographic is dangerous to freedom. It's dangerous to our republic. And when we're talking about 5 news networks controlling all the news, when we're talking about Facebook, Google, and big tech companies controlling all of the flow of information throughout the country and so on, I think we need to think long and hard about who we are as a country. And that's why I've said on this show before, we need a Teddy Roosevelt to come in and bust it up. I think that's ultimately the answer to how to diversify a lot of these interests that currently are running the country with monopoly power.
Nick?
All I can do is say thank our guest for showing up to the Lawyer's Den, because we're past the hour, and want to thank our viewing audience around the world who listens to the Lawyer's Den on IBM TV. And I guess we'll see everybody tomorrow on the Lawyer's Den. Thank you.